She had been mopping the same stretch of hallway for 3 years when the coffee machine in the executive suite finally gave out. It was a Tuesday in February, early enough that the sky outside the glass tower was still the color of ash, and Renee Caldwell had already logged 4 hours on her feet. She was 34 years old, lean from a decade of work that never stopped. With close-cropped natural hair she kept tight against her head and hands, that knew what real labor felt like. She wore the grey uniform of Crestfield Building Services, a small laminated badge with her photo clipped above her left breast pocket, and rubber-soled shoes she had resoled twice because she could not yet afford a new pair. Her daughter Amara was 9 and slept in a twin bed under 3 blankets. Because Renee kept the apartment thermostat at 62 to save on the gas bill, she had been doing this, the early morning shift, the long hallway, the careful inventory of what needed doing. For 3 years and 4 months, she had no idea that the answer she was about to give would change both their lives. On the 31st floor, which Renee reached at 6:47 on that Tuesday morning, the coffee machine sat beside the window that looked out over the city. It was a commercial espresso unit, matte black, brushed steel, the kind that cost more than Renee made in 4 months. It had stopped working sometime the night before. 2 IT specialists had already looked at it before the building officially opened. They had shrugged and written a ticket. A contract technician from the equipment vendor had been called and could come Thursday. In the meantime, someone had taped a handwritten note to the machine, out of service. The 12 people who worked on 31 depended on that machine. The way working people depend on the first reliable thing of a hard morning, and its absence was felt like a missing step. Renee did not see the note at first. She came through the glass door with her cart, moving quietly the way she always did, because 31 was never fully empty, and she had learned not to disturb people who were already in the mode of thinking. She noticed the machine in the way she noticed everything on her floors. She had cleaned this room 431 mornings. She knew where the light hit, where the grime collected, which corners people skipped, and which ones they did not. She noticed the machine because its front panel had a particular kind of darkness. She recognized, not broken, dark. Locked, dark. She set her cart against the wall and looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at the note. Then she reached into the right-hand pocket of her uniform and found what she always carried there, a small zippered kit, no bigger than her palm. She unzipped it and took out a flathead screwdriver, the kind you use for electrical panels, nothing more. She pressed the release on the base panel. The panel dropped. She looked inside for 40 seconds. She found the thermal fuse which had tripped. She reset it. She closed the panel. She pressed the power button. The machine took 22 seconds to run through its startup cycle, and then the green light came on. She put the screwdriver away and went back to her cart. She did not think about it as anything other than what it was. She had grown up watching her father fix things. Ernest Caldwell had been an appliance repair technician for 31 years, driving a van with a magnetic sign on the side and a toolbox that weighed more than Renee did when she was 7. He had fixed every appliance in every house they had ever lived in, and he had talked while he worked, naming the parts, naming the reasons, naming what had gone wrong and what it would take to put it right. There was a patience in the way he worked that Renee had spent years trying to name. He never hurried a diagnosis. He said that hurrying was how you mistook the symptom for the problem, and that the problem was always inside the thing, waiting for someone to be still enough to find it. She had been 12 when she fixed her first machine herself, a washing machine at their apartment on Kelton Street, which had stopped mid-cycle and left 4 inches of standing water in the drum. Her father was on a job across town, and her mother was at work, and the laundry included her school clothes for Monday. She had gone to the machine with her father's smallest kit, the green zippered one he kept for residential calls, and she had opened the panel the way she had seen him do it, and found the lid switch, which had shorted. She had described it to her father on the phone, part by part, and he had walked her through the fix, calm and unhurried, the way he always was. When he came home that evening, the machine was running. He had never made a big thing of it. He had set his toolbox down and looked at the machine and said, "You didn't over-tighten the switch cover." Renee had said, "I know." He had said, "Good." Then they had eaten dinner. That was all. She had not inherited the van or the business which went with her uncle when Ernest passed of a heart attack 6 years ago. The same spring Amara turned 3. The business had never been hers to inherit anyway. She had taken the green zippered kit from his workbench the day they cleared out his garage. Not because anyone offered it to her, but because no one thought to stop her, and because it had been on that workbench for 31 years, and she knew what it was for. She had been carrying it ever since. Not a memorial, a tool. Her father had not been a sentimental man, and she was not a sentimental woman. And the kit was the kit because it was useful, and she knew how to use it. She knew what a tripped fuse looked like, the way some people know a face. The machine was making espresso by 7:15. She did not know that Owen Marsh was standing in the doorway when she did it. Owen Marsh was 53 years old, 6 feet, and change, with a build that still carried the shoulders of someone who had played college ball, though that was 30 years behind him. He was the chief executive officer of Crestfield Capital, which occupied floors 28 through 32 of this building and managed $14 billion in institutional real estate assets. He had a short silver beard kept close to his jaw, deep-set eyes the color of old bourbon, a brow that creased into 2 hard lines when he was thinking, and a dark charcoal suit that cost more than Renee's car was worth. He had come in at 6:30 because he had a call with Singapore at 7, and had wanted a single espresso before it started. He had seen the note on the machine. He had started to turn away. Then he had heard the faint sound of the base panel releasing, and something in him had made him stop and watch from the doorway. Instead of leaving, he watched her work. He watched the careful, unhurried precision of it. He watched her put the screwdriver away, press the button, wait. He watched the green light come on. He said nothing. He let her return to her cart. He stepped into the room only after she had her back to him, and he stood in front of the machine for a long moment, looking at it, and then he pressed the shot button and listened to the grind and pull of it, the warm smell rising, and he thought about what he had just seen. He did not ask her then. He carried his espresso to his office and made his call, and spent most of the day in meetings. But he thought about it. He thought about the kit in her pocket, which meant it was not an accident. He thought about the 40 seconds, which meant she had known what she was looking for. He thought about how she had not waited for someone to thank her. She had put the thing back to rights and returned to what she was doing, as if fixing a broken thing was simply what you did when you encountered one. He thought about that for the rest of the day. Renee, for her part, finished her shift, collected Amara from the before-school program 2 blocks from the apartment, walked her to the school entrance, kissed her on the top of her head, and took the bus back home to sleep, 4 hours before her second job started. Her second job was an evening cleaning shift at a medical office building on Crestfield's west side, 4 nights a week. She had been working both jobs for 8 months, since her building raised the rent by $212, and she had had to choose between asking her mother for money and finding more hours. She had chosen more hours. She was tired in a way that had settled into her joints, the way cold settles in a room with a bad seal. It was not dramatic. It was just the weather of her life, and she moved through it the same way she moved through everything, methodically, with the particular grace of someone who had learned to save energy for what mattered. What mattered was Amara. Amara, who had her father's eyes and Renee's stubbornness and a way of asking questions that made Renee feel, every time, that the world was larger and more interesting than exhaustion made it seem. Amara had asked that week why the moon always showed the same face. Renee had told her, rotating her fist slowly in the kitchen light. Amara had said, so the moon has a secret side, and Renee had said yes, and they had both sat with that for a minute. Amara's school had sent a letter home the week before. There was an enrichment program, a citywide competition for students who showed exceptional aptitude in science and mathematics, and Amara's teacher, a young woman named Mrs. Okafor, had nominated Amara for it. The program cost $400. Renee had folded the letter and put it in the kitchen drawer. With the others, she was not yet ready to answer. $400. She had looked at the number with the same flat attention she gave to all the numbers in her life, measuring it against the rent, the utilities, the groceries, the bus passes, the cost of Amara's winter coat that was already a size too small. She loved her daughter with the kind of precision that demanded honesty, and what was honest was that $400 was not somewhere she could reach right now without something else falling. She had not told Amara about the letter. She did not see the point yet. If you have ever tried to decide between your child's future and this month's gas bill, tell me what you thought about at night. Because Renee thought about Amara's questions. She thought about the secret side of the moon. She thought about what it meant to be the kind of person who noticed things other people walked past. She went back to work on Wednesday morning and did not think about the coffee machine at all. She did her floors. She refilled the paper towel dispensers on 2088. She removed a coffee stain from the carpet runner outside conference room B on 20min with the solution she mixed herself because it was better than what the company provided. She worked the way she always worked, with attention and without ceremony. Owen found her on Thursday. He came to 29 just before 7 while she was still in the conference room, and he knocked on the open door. She turned. She saw the suit before she saw the face. Then she saw the face. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "Yes, sir," she said. Her voice was even. She set down the cloth she had been using. "The machine on 31, he said. "Tuesday morning. I was in the doorway. You fixed it." She waited a beat. The thermal fuse had tripped. It was a simple reset. "How did you know what it was?" She considered him. She had been working in buildings long enough to understand the range of reasons an executive might come to the cleaning floor, and most of them were not good. She decided to answer the question as asked. "My father was a repair technician. I grew up watching him work. I carry a small kit because sometimes you can fix something on your way past and save somebody." The wait. Owen was quiet for a moment. He looked at her the way he looked at things he was trying to understand from the inside out. "What else can you fix?" he said. The question surprised her. She studied his expression and found it did not contain what she had braced for: condescension, amusement, the particular kind of interest that meant someone was about to make a joke. It was a real question. "Depends on what's broken," she said. He nodded once, slowly. "What's your name?" "Renee," she said. "Renee Caldwell." He repeated it like he was filing it somewhere, deliberate. Then he said, "I won't keep you." "Thank you, Miss Caldwell." He left. She stood in the conference room for 3 seconds, listening to the sound of the hallway, returning to its normal wait, and then she went back to work. She did not know what to make of it. She told herself it was nothing. Executives asked questions. They got curious about things and then forgot about them. She had been noticed before in the way service workers get noticed, and it had never meant anything that lasted. She was careful not to let herself think about it. There was something in the way he had said her name, though she set it aside. She had Amara to think about. The following Monday, a woman from Crestfield Capital's HR department called the main office of Crestfield Building Services and asked for the employee file of one Renee. The HR director, a precise woman named Gail, asked what the inquiry was regarding. She was told that it was a standard background review related to a facilities initiative. Gail noted the call in the log and sent the file. Renee knew nothing about this. She was at that hour at the medical office building, cleaning the waiting room and restocking the hand sanitizer dispensers and thinking about whether she could move Amara's dance class to a different day to save the bus fare on Thursdays. On Wednesday of that same week, Owen had a conversation that had nothing to do, on its surface, with a coffee machine or a cleaning woman on the 29th floor. He was meeting with the head of his operations team, a sharp-shouldered man named Tyrell, who had been with him for 11 years. They were reviewing the facility management contract that Crestfield Capital held with its building services provider. It came up for renewal in March. Owen asked Tyrell to pull the performance metrics for the last 2 quarters and bring them to the Thursday morning meeting. Then he asked separately whether Tyrell knew if Crestfield Building Services offered any kind of internal advancement track for their workers, whether they had a technical division, an equipment maintenance arm, anything of that kind. Tyrell looked at him. "Ask it directly," Owen said. "I was trying to understand the question," Tyrell said. "I'll tell you the rest after the metrics meeting." He spent Thursday morning reading a report on facilities efficiency that used the word streamlined 14 times without once mentioning the people who did the actual work. He read it the way he read all such reports, with the part of his mind the processed language and the other part somewhere else. Entirely. The other part was on Renee and the 40 seconds it had taken her to diagnose something 2 certified technicians and 1 vendor had walked away from. He had her file on his desk by Friday afternoon. What he read was not surprising and was at the same time quietly leveling. Renee had worked for Crestfield Building Services for 3 years and 4 months with a perfect attendance record. She had received 3 commendations from floor managers. She had 1 formal write-up from her first month for returning to a work area after her shift had ended, which turned out to mean she had gone back to retrieve a tenant's lost wallet and turn it into building security. The note on the write-up said, in parentheses, tenant subsequently requested commendation. There was no commendation in the file. The write-up stayed. Before Crestfield Building Services, she had worked for a hotel housekeeping operation for 2 years. Before that, she had done a 14-month stint at a fulfillment center on the overnight sort, which she had left to care for her daughter after a change in childcare arrangements. She had no college degree. She had a certification in appliance servicing from a vocational program she had completed 11 years ago, before Amara, before the overnight sort, before the whole long architecture of survival she had been building and maintaining ever since. He sat with the file for a while. 14 years ago, Owen had hired a man named Dennis Pryor to oversee the facilities operations of his first major building acquisition. Dennis had come with excellent references and 3 certifications and a confident vocabulary about systems integration and preventive maintenance schedules. He had cost considerably more than the building's previous in-house manager, and he had, over 4 years, presided over 3 equipment failures that required emergency vendor callouts, 2 HVAC crises during summer heat, and a plumbing backup that had damaged 2 floors of tenant space. Dennis had known the language of the work. He had not known the work. Owen had spent some time after Dennis thinking about the difference. He thought he had understood it by now. You could not always see it in a resume. The resume told you what someone had learned in the places where learning was formal and recorded. It did not tell you what they had absorbed standing next to someone who knew something, or what they had thought about in the years after, or whether they had spent 11 years carrying a kit in a pocket and using it whenever something needed doing. The resume was the surface. Under the surface was the disposition, and the disposition was either there or it was not. He thought about a write-up for returning to find a lost wallet. He thought about a commendation that got requested but never filed. He thought about the vocational certification 11 years old and what it meant that she was still carrying the kit and using it when something needed doing, not because anyone asked, not because anyone would know, but because it was what you did when you encountered a broken thing and you knew how to fix it. He thought about the 40 seconds. He called Tyrell that afternoon. "I want you to set up a meeting for me," he said, "with MS Caldwell, not a performance review, not a facilities inquiry, a conversation. See if she's willing." Tyrell said, "What should I tell her it's about?" "Tell her I have a question I didn't finish asking on Thursday." Renee got the message through her shift supervisor on Friday at the end of her morning floors. The supervisor, a brisk woman named Carmen, who had known Renee for 2 of her 3 years, read it from her phone screen with the careful neutrality of someone who has learned not to predict. "Mr. Pree, Marsh's office wants to know if you're available for a meeting Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock, 32nd floor." Renee set her supply cart against the wall. 32 was the executive level, the floor she cleaned only twice a week and where she had never been asked to remain past her tasks. "Did they say what it was about?" she said. Just that he had a question he didn't finish asking Thursday. She took the bus home in the particular silence of someone who is trying not to hope too specifically. The number 6 ran along the route she knew well enough to close her eyes on, and she sat in the second seat from the back where she always sat, with her bag in her lap and the window at her shoulder showing the city going grey and cold in the late afternoon. The bus was 3/4 full. A woman 2 seats ahead was feeding a baby. An old man in the front row was reading something on his phone with the screen held very close. Ordinary life, moving forward, indifferent and various the way it always was. She told herself it was probably a formal thank you, a small thing. Maybe a gift card, the kind companies gave when they did not know what else to do. She had received 2 of those in her working life, a grocery store card after a positive tenant review at the hotel, and a department store card when the building operations team had recognized the 3 commendations in the same quarter. Both had been presented in a small, sealed envelope with her name on a printed label, and both had felt like a handshake from a long distance. She appreciated them and used them and did not think about them again. She told herself this was probably that, a handshake from a distance, 32 floors up, but still a distance. She thought about Amara's letter in the kitchen drawer. She thought about the $400. She thought about the secret side of the moon and what Amara had said, and whether it was possible that a person could carry something useful in their pocket for 11 years and have it still be waiting for the right moment. She got off at her stop and walked the 3 blocks home and did not let herself think anything more about it until she was inside with her shoes off and the kettle on. She pressed her good blouse that weekend. It was dark green, the colour of something that had been washed many times and had settled into itself, and she wore it with dark slacks and her cleanest shoes. She arrived on 32 at 7:53, 7 minutes early, because she was always early. Tyrell met her in the lobby and brought her to a conference room that looked out over the whole city to the east. The morning light was coming in at an angle that made everything look like it was being studied. She sat down and folded her hands on the table. Owen came in at exactly 8. He sat across from her. He had a single sheet of paper in front of him, face down. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Caldwell," he said. "Thank you for the invitation," she said. He was quiet for a moment. She waited. "I read your file," he said. "I want to be honest about that. I asked HR to pull it after we spoke Thursday, and I read it." She kept her expression even. "All right," she said. "You have a vocational certification in appliance servicing, 11 years ago, from Harmon Tech." "Harmon Tech," he repeated it. "That closed in 2018, 2019, she said. "I was 2 years out by then." He nodded. He looked at her in the same way he had in the doorway of 31 from the inside out. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know there's no wrong answer. Because this is a question about what you want, not what I need." She did not say anything. "We are about to renegotiate the facilities contract for this building. Part of that negotiation involves whether we bring certain equipment maintenance functions in-house, rather than continuing to route them through a vendor with a 48-hour response window." He paused. "The machine on 31 was down for 2 days before you fixed it in under a minute. That is a 48-hour plus failure for something a 1-minute diagnostic resolved. It was a simple reset," she said again. "You keep saying that," he said, "and I keep noticing that nobody else did it." She looked at him directly. "Here is what I am asking," he said. We are prepared to create a facilities technician role, a salaried position, full benefits, a defined scope covering the equipment maintenance needs of this building and 3 other Cresfield properties we manage. We would require a certification update, which we would pay for. I want to know if that is something you would consider." Renee sat very still. She thought about Amara's letter. She thought about the thermostat at 62. She thought about her father's van with the magnetic sign and the toolbox that weighed more than she did when she was 7, and how she had never been able to explain, even to herself, why she had kept the kit in her pocket all these years, fixing things on the way past, not because anyone asked, not because anyone would know. She thought about 31's green light coming on. "Yes," she said, "I would consider it." "Good," he said. He turned the paper over. "This is a preliminary offer letter. It is not final. You should have a lawyer look at it, or someone you trust. Take whatever time you need." She looked at the letter. The number at the top of the salary line was not what she had been making. It was not close to what she had been making. It was more than she had ever made. She looked up at him. "Why this?" she said. "There are technicians. There are certifications you can require in a contract. Why not just require them?" He considered the question. "Because you fixed the machine and went back to your cart," he said. Because you carry a kit in your pocket for things that need doing, and you use it without waiting to be asked. That's not a certification, that's a disposition. And I have been in this business long enough to know that you cannot train that into someone who does not already have it. Renee looked at the letter again. My daughter has a school program, she said. A science competition. It costs $400. Then I hope you'll say yes, he said. Take the time you need. She took 2 days. She sat with the offer letter on her kitchen table Tuesday evening after Amara was asleep, and she read it 3 times. Not because it was hard to understand. Because she wanted to be sure she was understanding what she thought she was understanding, and not what she wished she were understanding, which was distinction she had learned the hard way to make. She had been offered things before that were not exactly what they appeared to be. A landlord's promise about a working heater, a supervisor's word about a schedule change that never came through. She had learned to read the paper and not the person. And so she read the paper. What the paper said was this: a salaried position at a rate she had not expected, with health insurance that covered Amara, 2 weeks of paid vacation, and a defined scope of work across 4 Crestfield properties with a 6-month review. The certification update was covered, the equipment was covered, her start date would be the first Monday of April, subject to completion of the update and a standard background check. She had her cousin Dara, who had worked in HR at a hospital for 12 years, read the offer letter and confirmed that it said what it appeared to say. Dara called her back in 40 minutes. Renee, Dara said, this is real. I know, Renee said. Then what are you waiting for? She thought about it for the rest of that day, not because she was uncertain. She had been certain when she read the letter the first time. What she was doing was something different from deciding. She was sitting with the fact of it, the way you sometimes need to sit with a thing before you can carry it forward, because it is heavier than ordinary things and you need to know where to hold it. She had spent 8 months working 2 jobs to pay a $212 rent increase. She had spent 3 years in a grey uniform with a laminated badge. She had spent 11 years carrying a kit in a right-hand pocket because it was what her father would have done and because things needed fixing and she knew how. She had not been waiting for anything in particular. She had simply been doing the work. She thought about what it meant to say yes to something you had stopped letting yourself expect. She thought about how hope can feel after a long time without it, not like warmth, but like a door. You are afraid to open too fast because you have learned the cost of what is sometimes behind them. She called Owen's office on Thursday morning and told the assistant that she was ready to accept. The paperwork was signed the following week. The certification update, a 2-week evening course at a technical college on the north side of the city, was scheduled to begin in March. Crestfield Capital would cover the tuition and the testing fees and the cost of a kit. A real one, not the one she carried in her pocket, but a full-service tool set in a case with her name on a tag. Her last morning shift with Crestfield Building Services was a Friday. Carmen hugged her in the hallway outside the supply room, which was not something Carmen had ever done before, and told her she had always known this was temporary. Rainey said 3 years and 4 months is not temporary. Carmen said it is when you're you. She walked out of the building at noon. The sun was doing something to the city streets that made them look briefly like something worth staying in. She stopped at the corner and stood in it for a moment. Then she went to pick up Amara early. She had not told her daughter about the job yet. She had wanted to tell her in person, without the shadow of almost or maybe, or we'll see. She wanted to tell her with the finished version, the signed papers, the start date, the number on the salary line that was not what she had been making. Amara came through the school entrance at 2:47, her backpack bouncing, her face already scanning for Renee the way it always did, as if she had a signal she was following. She saw her mother at the gate and stopped. "You're early," she said. "I am," Renee said. Amara looked at her mother's face. She was 9 years old, and she had her father's eyes and Renee's stubbornness and the specific gift of knowing when something had shifted. "What happened?" she said. Renee crouched down so they were eye level. She held Amara's face in both hands. She said, "You know that program Mrs. Okafor told you about, the science one? Amara went very still. "I need you to tell Mrs. Praed." "Okafor, yes," Renee said. Amara looked at her for 2 full seconds. Then she said, "You fixed something." Renee laughed. It was the kind of laugh that costs something and gives something back at the same time. "Yes," she said. "I fixed something." Amara threw her arms around her mother's neck, and Renee held her there, on the sidewalk, in the February sun, for longer than she needed to, and exactly as long as she wanted to. The enrichment program ran for 8 weeks. Amara placed second in the citywide competition, losing by 3 points to a boy from a school on the north side, who had been in the program the previous year. Mrs. Okafor said she had never seen a first-year student come that close. Amara said she was going to win next year. Renee said she believed her. The certification update went well. The evening course ran 2 weeks at a technical college on the north side, 3 nights a week, 3 hours each session. The other students were mostly younger, mostly men, a few of them straight out of vocational programs and carrying that particular energy of people who had just learned a language and were eager to try it. Renee did not talk much in the sessions. She listened, and she took notes in her precise, practiced shorthand. And when the instructor, a heavy-set man named Mr. Becker, who had spent 22 years in commercial building systems, asked her a question, she answered it cleanly, without elaboration. He started directing the harder questions toward her by the 3rd session. She did not make a thing of it. She had always been methodical, and the coursework came back to her with the ease of something that had been there all along, waiting for the right door. The principles she had learned beside her father's workbench were all still accurate. The technologies had moved on in some ways. The diagnostic interfaces were different now, more digital, less physical, but the underlying logic was the same. A system had a sequence. The sequence had a failure point. The failure point had a cause. You found the cause by being patient and by starting with what was most likely and working outward. From there, she had been doing this her whole life. The certification was not teaching her something new. It was putting a number and a stamp on something she already knew. She passed her assessment in late March with a score of 94. Mr. Becker told her after the final session that she had the best diagnostic instinct in the group. She thanked him and did not tell him that she had been refining it in hallways and conference rooms for 3 years, or that she had been learning it for 34 years before that. Her first day in the new role was the first Monday of April. The uniform was different now, a deeper grey with the Crestfield Capital logo on the chest instead of the building services patch. And the tool case rode in the service elevator with her on a small folding cart. She had her own set of building access codes now, which were different from the access codes she had used for 3 years and 4 months on the cleaning floors. Different doors, same buildings. Her scope covered 4 properties and 31 equipment systems, from HVAC units to commercial refrigeration to the elevator monitoring boards that needed checking on a weekly schedule. She had a direct line to the facilities director, a methodical woman named Petra who had been in building management for 19 years and who met with Renee every Monday at 9 to review the week's priorities. She had a quarterly review. She had a desk, a small one, in a shared workspace on the 28th floor, which she used for her scheduling notes and her maintenance logs. On her first walkthrough of the 31st floor, she stopped in front of the coffee machine. The green light was on. She looked at it for a moment, checking the way she checked everything. Now, not because she expected trouble, but because checking was what you did, and because some things deserved a second of attention, even when they were working exactly right. It was fine. It had been fine since February. She moved on. There is something that gets said in certain kinds of stories about the moment a person's life turns, that it arrives like a sign or a sound or a sudden light. In Renee's case, it arrived like a green light on a machine that had been broken and was now fixed, and like a man in a doorway who saw the 40 seconds it took her to fix it and understood what they meant. It was not a miracle. It was 2 people paying the right kind of attention at the right moment, and one of them being someone who had never stopped doing the work that made the moment possible. She called her mother that Sunday night. Her mother, a woman named Estelle who had worked the front desk at a medical clinic for 24 years and asked God for very little that she was not prepared to earn, listened to the whole story without interrupting. When Renee finished, Estelle was quiet for a moment. "Your father carried that same kit," she said. "I know," Renee said. "He would have been proud of what you did with it." Renee held the phone in both hands. She was sitting at the kitchen table where she had opened the letter about Amara's program, and through the window the city was going about its own business, unconcerned and ordinary and precisely itself. "I'm proud of what I did with it," she said. It was the truest thing she had said in a long time. Amara was already asleep in the next room in the twin bed under 3 blankets that Renee would, by the end of the month, replace with a proper comforter. The thermostat was set to 68. The kitchen was clean. On the counter, in the space where the letter had been, there was nothing now, because the letter had been answered and the answer was yes. Renee turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. She slept until morning without waking, which was the first time in 8 months that she had. If this story made you think about the person in your life who keeps a quiet kit for things that need doing, tell me in the comments. There are people all around us doing the work that holds everything up, and most of them will never ask to be noticed. And if you want to stay with stories like this one, there is another one waiting for you when this one ends. Keep watching. This story is a work of fiction. All characters, names, events, and situations depicted are entirely invented for the purpose of emotional storytelling and do not represent any real persons or events.